I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this. Every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey everyone, Dan Smolin. I'm not sure what that echo was about. We had a little technical difficulty in the studio. Welcome around the world to everyone. I have a great show lined up for today, but before we get to that, I just wanted to say we're looking for some advertiser support. If you sponsor this show, you will lead a revolution. There are a lot of great brands out there. Some of you align with those brands are watching the show today. We'll give you a great audience that's very intentional and really cares about products and services that are meaningful to them. And if you can align with that, I'd love to have a conversation with you. So that's enough for me on my soapbox. You can reach out to me at dan@dansmolin.com or I am me on LinkedIn. Let's get to this right now. Our topic today is, why is my workplace so freaking serious? Bringing into the conversation, I want to introduce you all to Karyn Buxman. Hey, Karyn Buxman. How are you?
If I were any better, I'd be you, Dan.
And David Horning.
I am not Karyn Buxman. Just want to clear that up. That's her up there.
Well, welcome both. I am really excited about this. Let's get to the question. And this was submitted by a young man named Jake, not from State Farm, who asked the question, why is my workplace so freaking serious? I want to go to you, Karyn, first. Why is it so freaking serious?
I think that the absence of humor, I think part of it is that people are afraid of stepping in something. You know, I think that there's been so much hype about, offending other people and doing things that, whether it's personally or whether the order has come down from the ranks above to say, don't do that. Just don't do that. We're here to work. Quit goofing off. What do you think we're paying you for around here?
Right. David, stand-up comedian. Why is Jake's workplace so freaking serious?
It's through no fault of their own. It's a long, deep-seated belief that work has to be serious. It's that industrial mindset of reaching metrics and there's no time to do anything else. So for so long, it's been, hey, cookies and milk. But have you ever had a chocolate chip cookie with a glass of red wine? And that's what humor kind of introduces. It's just like a shift of the paradigm. And that's scary.
So
I think in addition to that, Dan, a lot of times people confuse professionalism with being solemn. Mm-hmm. It's like they confuse seriousness and solemnness. They think that you can't be serious without being, having a straight face. And this just doesn't have to be the case. You can still deliver a serious message. You can do serious work, but still lighten things up and have fun doing it.
Yes, the misperception, take your work seriously, take your clients, your customers, your employees seriously. But man, what if we stop taking ourselves so seriously?
Right.
I was so excited to get this segment started today. I didn't even introduce you guys. So let me take a step back. Karyn, you're a neurohumorist. We're going to talk about that. You're a leading expert in brain-based strategic humor that helps people achieve true success, lasting significance, and genuine happiness. And David, I've known you a long time. You are first and foremost a stand-up comedian, but when you're not on stage, you help companies to recruit, engage, and retain top talent by reframing the culture through the effective use of humor. So, Karyn, first, where do you get your neurohumorist degree? And can Joe Biden's payback plan on college tuition help me out with that?
I can just hear your listeners thinking, oh God, Dan, another neurohumorist? Come on,
Right.
enough,
Right.
enough. But I've been researching humor for over years, and the last decade have done a deep dive into the intersection of humor and the brain. And so it helps if you can be funny, be a humorist, and at the same time, what we have found is that humor, it's not brain surgery. It's close though. It's close, but I dissect humor so your listeners don't have to. And it's fascinating because the more we learn about the brain, the more we learn about humor, we learn the intricacies and how it goes back and forth. And having a little bit of that knowledge about how the brain is involved really, I mean, in some ways it helps separate people from feeling like, oh, I'm a bad person, or oh, I screwed something up. And it's like, it's not that you are a bad person. Your brain is wired to create certain behaviors, and if you can wire these behaviors, you can also unwire them and wire new behaviors, some of which have to do with laughter, fun, humor, whimsy, amusement. Come on, let's lighten up a little bit.
So, David, you you take humor to a level that I think most people would be completely afraid of, which is being on stage doing stand-up. I think of that scene from the Blues Brothers where the Blues Brothers are behind the chicken wire and they're throwing cans of beer and hard cider or whatever at the stage. It must feel like that for you a lot. But why, given that, why do you do what you do?
Because we work a majority of our waking lives. So why shouldn't it have an element of fun to it? Karyn, I love your use of the word whimsy, by the way. That needs to be in the modern vernacular a little bit more.
Yeah.
But really what I've seen is that, I can make you laugh. I can get on stage, I can tell jokes, you can laugh, have a great night. But are you going to remember it the next day? And so my thought process was, I love when people, listen to me humble bragging. I love when people come up to me after a show saying, oh, you made me laugh so hard. But what if I could teach you the same sort of thought process that I go through when I discover humor in the everyday things? And sometimes there are unfortunate things that I find the humor in. So if more people had that skill set, which, people associate humor with joke telling, but really humor is just problem solving. The same parts of our brain light up, and I'm stepping on your turf a little bit, Karyn, but the same parts of our brain light up when we get a joke as when we solve a problem. And so really, like, what if more people had that skill set? What if more people could find the humor in the mistakes and in the unfortunate things that happen on a daily basis, and kind of take a step back and think outside of themselves? And that's a skill that anybody can develop. You don't even have to be funny to do it.
So I think of humor as a great tool for either breaking bad news or mitigating a difficult circumstance. And okay, that happens a lot in business. Right now, companies are missing their quarterly numbers. So how does a leader in a workplace use humor to deal with that, mitigate that, keep it serious, and yet use humor to keep everybody from falling into complete despair? Karyn, you have any thoughts?
Well, when you said using humor to mitigate bad news, I mean, there's a good way to do that, and then there's a bad way to do it. It's like, I got some good news and I got some bad news, and so in terms of the humor, and I liked what David said earlier, because in some ways you don't have to be funny. There's lots of ways to leverage humor, but in terms of using humor, I think more as part of the culture and helping people, I guess, developing a sense of trust trust is so important in a culture, and humor is one of the things that can help you develop that sense of trust when it's done well, when it's modeled well by the leadership. And as you do that, then when things come up, when things go wrong, that level of trust is going to serve you well. Now, it still can be done in a light way, but you have to, people really need to kind of learn the ins and outs of that as to how to deliver that kind of thing. Because it's not that you want to just, deliver some bad news and make people laugh so they don't feel so bad. Because then the problem is still there when the laugh passes. You have to set it up so that there's, whether it's amusement or whimsy in that situation, but still address the problem, not just, laugh and hope nobody notices when you duck out the side door.
That's even more harmful than just letting it go.
Yeah.
I think humor is kind of, or at least joke writing is kind of a math problem. There has to be a solution to it. So a lot of my humor when I'm on stage, I learned that people really connect with when I share my mistakes, when I share my failures, because I've learned from it. Obviously, I've made light of it. If I just make light of it and poke fun at myself and that's it, people are going to be like, well, where's the punchline? Where's the end? Where's the moral of the story here? So kind of having that, we learned something from our mistake here. Humor or the bad numbers or layoffs or whatever it might be, that's just a setup to a punchline that hasn't been written yet, and kind of approaching it from a place of humor, like this is our starting point now, not this is the end all be all. Giving yourself permission to use humor, kind of it creates a growth mindset. Whereas if I can write a joke about this, or if I can laugh about this, or if I can look at this differently, that means I can do something about it. And that's kind of the pattern interrupt that humor presents, because we we're thinking the same way for so long, like, oh, layoffs, let's use layoffs for example, or downsizing, whatever. We associate that with a negative thing over and over again. We think of all the things that could go wrong as a result of them, whereas that's just the starting point. Like,
right.
All right, here's the information that we have. How can we mold this into a joke or mold this into a solution? Because that's how I frame humor to companies that are a little more resistant to it. I don't even use the word humor. This is creative problem solving driven by curiosity. And so if I know that there's a punchline, now my brain's getting to work trying to figure out how to get from where I am to that punchline or solution in this case.
And it's agility too. And here's the real life example of that. Something went completely terribly wrong with our distribution this morning to LinkedIn. I'm getting comments from people saying, I can't see you. It's looping weird. It's doing crazy stuff. I'm gonna laugh about it, because what am I supposed to do? It's out of my control. It's in the hands of the gods right now that control the interwebs. And I'll find some agile way to deal with it. We'll just find a different way of replaying this wonderful segment to our LinkedIn audience. So,
can I give you a couple of other examples?
Please.
Two that popped up in my head. One was a colleague who was telling me that when he was in sales, and they're having, their like fourth quarter meeting, and their sales VP comes in, and before they get started, because they know that they're facing some really unhappy news about their numbers, he handed everybody a crying towel. And he said, all right, get it out of your system. We'll cry about it, but then we're going to make sure that we end strong. And everybody laughed. They were kind of waving their crying towels in the air, and then they moved on. But they started it with some whimsy. They're acknowledging the problem. They're laughing about the problem, but then they're moving to solve the problem. Another gal that I worked with actually in a healthcare system told me that she said, we have a poets meeting. And she goes, I have it every week with my managers. And I said, poetry? She goes, no, poets. Piss on everything tomorrow, Saturday. She said, so on Fridays, they would get together.
I'm sorry. I had to think about that a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. They would go out and have a drink. They'd curse. They'd laugh. They'd cry. They'd have a good time. And then she goes, I don't want them carrying their work with them to the weekend. I want them to have the weekend with a clear mind. And so they had their poets meeting every Friday night. And I just thought that, these little things that people do are just genius. So a couple quick examples that I thought of.
That tension release is chef's kiss.
Yes, yes.
I want to pivot to the concept of forced fun. So why am I showing you this picture?
What is that?
This is from Jake, not from State Farm, who said forced fun feels like being one of the Apollo 11 astronauts, hermetically sealed in an airstream, and fake laughing as the boss tells inappropriate jokes about them.
Oh my God.
Now, when he said that, I went, I know the picture.
That's Nixon, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's Tricky Dick. And that's,
oh my God.
Now you remember why they were in the airstream, because we thought moon germs were more contagious than COVID-19. Right? So does Jake have a point here? I mean, is forced fun, is that what's going on? I mean, is it sort of a vehicle for the person up on high to control you and abuse you? Or are there other aspects going on here, folks?
You can't yell at people to laugh and expect them to want to laugh or to like you. So, it's very disingenuous doing that, for sure. I'm sure you've seen it, Karyn.
Oh my gosh. I know, it's just like, you're going to go down, you're going to have fun, and, the beatings will continue until morale improves. Yeah. And that's why it is so important, I think, to really have this effuse into the culture, and to have these kinds of things that are co-created, because people support what they co-create rather than being directed down from the top. I don't know. What do you think about that, David?
Oh, I think definitely giving people a sense of agency to create something that's authentic to those who are on the front line versus, coming from the top down, because there's a natural resistance to authority. Like, we have that as human beings. We like to poke fun at those on top. It helps us mitigate our own emotions. And so when, fun comes from the top, it just doesn't feel right. Giving people kind of a say is so much more magical than telling people what to say. I mean, if you go to an improv show and the audience gives a suggestion to the improvisers and then they make magic on stage, the audience feels like they're part of it. Right. Whereas if the improvisers get on stage and they're like, we're going to talk about cupcakes, and the audience is like, well, then why are we here?
Well, right. And, and from a brain perspective, one of the things that fires up the brain is autonomy. Mm-hmm. People don't want to be told what to do. I mean, we certainly saw that during the pandemic, and, it's the same thing in the workplace. And that's why, as David said, and, the ability to co-create like you do in improv is something that'll get a lot more buy-in and a lot of more participation, and people will actually enjoy it more because they're not pushing against.
Well, one thing Jake said to me after he had a few adult beverages, I met him at a camp reunion, and so he's a bit younger than I am. He probably
band camp?
What's that?
Band camp?
No, overnight camp, co-ed overnight camp. Not not anything in particular. One that I was aligned with in as a child in Connecticut, and then worked as a staff member, and then became involved as an alumni member. But what he said to me, and he works in he asked that I not mention the name of the company, but it's in the financial services. And what he said was, the forced fun that happens makes him feel as if I make you laugh, then I can get more out of you, and you will, and I will own you while you were here because we're having a good time. And when he said that, I thought about a show that David and I really like, which is Severance on Apple TV Plus, which really gets this idea of forced fun in a very strange science fiction type of way, in which the people that are at the office, they are completely owned. And then one of the people comes in with a fruit tray and they dance and they have a good time and everything. But I think he kind of has a point there. That's a bad use of trying to use humor, is to own people. It should make them feel good about their time there, but also allow them to be free and have a life outside the office. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that if they can, select in or select out, I mean, that's going to be a big part of that. And I think the reason that sometimes they force the fun is because a lot of people are selecting out. Right there should be a clue that you have a problem. If people are selecting out of a good time, then then it's not really a good time. And what does that mean? What is the organization, what is the culture telling you if people want to opt out of a fun time? And so I think that there needs to be some real introspection there on the leadership part.
People can feel inauthenticity from the top too, just like when somebody goes on stage, or I mean, even in a day-to-day interaction, the person who's trying to be funny, you can tell. And nobody wants to be around that person. But if it comes naturally, then people are like, when's the next time I'm going to hang out with Jake? And that's a very important part of it. Also, the distinction of like, why are you trying to get people to have fun? Are you trying to get more out of them? Because if that's the case, rethink it, because what you really want to do as somebody in a leadership position is give your people the opportunity to come together and connect as people versus, we're going to have fun together because then they'll be more productive next quarter. It's like, let that be a side effect that naturally happens versus the end game.
This reminds me of a time when I spoke to this company. I spoke to the leadership in Chicago, and they were just like, oh my gosh, this is just this is awesome. Best thing since Velcro. Would you come back in 6 weeks, and talk to everybody from middle management down to housekeeping? And it's like, pause 3 counts for just your presence and say, oh, well, yeah, of course I can do that. But I came back in 6 weeks, and I, over the course of 3 days, spoke to every department. And the one thing that really surprised me was that on the evaluations consistently was, oh, this was great. I wish my boss could have heard it. The bosses didn't attend. They weren't using any of the things that they were taught. And it felt so inauthentic. And it felt like this separation of church and state here. It was like, why, miles apart.
Is the misuse of humor or the misuse of comedic interaction in an office often symptomatic of a boss who doesn't know how to lead? Boy, talk about a loaded question. What do you think, David?
I think a little bit. I think a lot of it has to do with you're not sure what your culture actually is. It's like the more I see the word culture in your About Us page on your website, the less I think you know what your culture actually is. And, if you aren't really living your values on a day-to-day basis from the C-suite down, then, what humor is to your organization, it's just let's throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and hope it makes us more money. And that's not the way to approach it.
What do you think, Karyn?
I do think that it can be a leadership problem. And I think part of it is that humor is a lot more convoluted than people think at first glance. And I think a lot of leaders, I think a lot of managers, I think, they want you to tell them where's the line so that we don't cross it. The problem is it's not a line. It's a moving target. There's so many different components to it. And I was addressing a group of VPs of sales in pharmaceuticals, and we were talking about this very thing, and a gal came up to me afterwards and she said, so I have this issue. She said, I had this really great group of people. They were using humor appropriately. I have a new hire and she wants to be part of the group. And they're not really including her. So she tries to use humor. Her form of humor is sarcasm, which causes them to push back. And when she gets pushed back, she tries harder and they push back harder and she tries harder. And she goes, so I finally just took her aside and said, don't use any humor in the office. She said, was that the right thing to do? I said, well, that's one approach. You could do that. Obviously you did it. How's that working for you? Or you could teach her how to use humor appropriately. And now it's a win-win with her and the customers. It's a win-win with her and the colleagues. It's a win-win with her and you. I mean, it's like everybody's happier. But the challenge is that a lot of leaders don't know how to educate their team on what to look for. And it's, every situation has different kinds of things that come into play that you need to understand so that it is inclusive and it is positive and it is uplifting and it is fun, instead of something that feels forced or something that's restrictive or something that's just not working for you.
A lot of that comes with, it's like if someone in the audience heckles you, your first instinct is to punch back.
Right.
However, so many more interactions end positively with the whole audience getting on board if you're curious about that person. And so, approaching a new group of people from a place of sarcasm, based on your example, eventually, like, the organization should be teaching curiosity as a skill, because that's really the driving force behind humor, is like, what's out of the ordinary here? What's weird here? What's different? And kind of approaching it from that place of curiosity will make you more endearing to your audience, in this case, your coworkers or your employees, whatever. And it offers new solutions that you might not have thought of before, because you're approaching it from an open mindset. So I think the come from based around humor should always start with curiosity and then go from there.
I think if you teed up curiosity, I think some people would, if they're in a busy, frenetic work situation, may not know how to grab onto it. Is recognizing absurdity may be a better target, because we all are surrounded by that. What are your thoughts?
My gosh, absurdity is everywhere. And but so many times, and I'm guessing you guys hear this too, it's like, but it's different for you. There's nothing funny happening in my life, that they're not seeing the absurdity. And again, this goes back to wiring of the brain, because, if that's your belief, that's your reality. Your reticular activating system, which is the filter in the brain, is going to show you what you give your attention to. You give your attention to a pair of shoes on Zappos. Pretty soon, the internet is showing you those shoes on every single page that you go to. And it's not judging good or bad. It's just saying, you paid attention to that, we're going to give you more of it. Same thing with humor. If you're not paying attention to it in the first place, your brain's not going to show you more of it. But as people start that process of actively, intentionally, consistently listening, they're going to find the absurdity. They're going to hear things that people miss. They're going to see things. I was trying to unclose the other day in a dress shop, and as I'm pulling on a pair of jeans, the woman in the dressing room next to me, I hear her blurt out, "Lord, if this dress were any tighter, it would fit me like a mammogram." I lost it, and I quit getting dressed, and I pull out a pen and paper, and I write it down, and I put it in my bag. I forgot about it. But 3 weeks later, I clean out my bag and I find it, which is why I think it's also a good thing for people who are in the process of rewiring to write these things down or to make note of them, because you're not going to remember them. You're not going to notice them until you make it an intentional habit.
Right. And it's not like joke writing. I don't sit down and like write something funny. I just make notes in my phone. What's weird that happened to me today? What's out of the ordinary? I'll just make like a quick little like one sentence note, like a billboard over explaining things. And then I'll just go on with my day. And then eventually, there will be a spark that will like reveal what's actually funny about that. And it's humor is a muscle. And so if you spend 5 minutes every day, journaling what's weird, what's interesting, what's out of the ordinary, eventually your brain is going to start looking for those things, like you were saying, the reticular activating system. And that's just a daily practice. 5 minutes every day. Listen to a funny podcast on the way to work. Don't listen to the news.
Don't listen to the news. Don't listen to the news. There's nothing funny going on. So both give me for the headcount manager, the C-suite leader, or whatever, who doesn't really know how to get their hands around the positive, effective, intentional use of humor in the workplace. What's one starting point, one easy starting point that you think they could think about to get this process started and make their workplace a little less serious and more fun?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, one quick, fast, easy way is just to seek humor consistently from other people. I mean, we already started with the fact that you want to be looking intently and actively for humor. But here's one of the nice things where our brains are hardwired for humor and laughter. Our brains are hardwired for stories. We connect through both. And when we're sharing those, we're causing our bodies to produce oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. And so, one of the questions that I ask, complete strangers, Uber drivers, somebody, the hotel clerks, whoever I see, tell me about the craziest event that you've ever had with, a client, a customer, or what's the most embarrassing moment you can laugh about now. And, a couple things happen. One, people assume you have a sense of humor because you're asking. No, you weren't the funny person, but you were asking that something that is humorous, something that is whimsical. And humor is seen as a highly desired leadership trait. Now you're bonding over a story. Now you're collecting stories. And then the real gift is that when you reshare that story, you get another hit of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and you're creating this database of things that you can use and share in your board meetings and your sales meetings and other kinds of things that make you appear more human and more approachable.
That's wonderful. David, what are your thoughts?
I love the asking of questions, especially those open-ended questions. I think that really activates that part of the brain. I think questions like, what's your pet peeve? Why do you love it so much? And then getting people to kind of flip that narrative.
Ooh, I like that.
It allows them to think outside of themselves for just a moment, and repeated practice of that allows people to, when something unexpected, oh, I got laid off, or, oh, this great employee just left our company out of the blue to go somewhere else. Why do I love that so much? That changes the whole narrative. And it's just the simple act of, what's the opposite of how I feel right now? And then just thinking actively about that. That's a great way to do it. Also, defer. If you don't think you have a funny or creative bone in your body, defer to those people who are already surrounded by laughter, bringing the sunshine into the office. Start with them, let them lead, and kind of provide the guidelines based on your culture, based on your values, for how to integrate humor into the day-to-day. I think those two things, just flipping the narrative and deferring to those who are already doing it. Why try to start an uphill battle with yourself? You're just going to frustrate yourself. So lean into the people that are already doing it. I think that's something that, the class clown really does have a productive role in the office if they are allowed to use their sense of humor as a strength and as a trait. And like you said, Karyn, it's a highly desired trait in the workplace nowadays.
Right.
That is some sage advice, both of you. I really appreciate it. We've run out of time. I want to ask you both the burning question: what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work part of your day, doing many meaningful things and not just the day? Karyn, roll with it.
I have rituals. And, I have morning rituals, I have evening rituals that kind of sandwich my day. But just like, in sports or in any kind of competitive situation, mindset is so important. And I stumbled into this accidentally. I now encourage people to do it. But, I have an accountability partner, and I told her I would send her something humorous every day. And when I first started this, I thought, oh, what a good person I am for doing this nice thing for her. Because you do get a hit of dopamine when you do something nice for another person. But here's what I realized: because every morning I start my first 10 to 15 minutes looking for humor that's going to help her, I was totally reframing my day. And it's almost like putting on sunscreen. It's like, I put on this humor screen and the first thing in the morning for 10, 15 minutes. And then, when I get the email blast first thing that says, oh, we got to have an emergency meeting or something, it's like, aha, I've got my superpower, whatever. So that's one of the things that I would do.
David?
I've always been like the class clown. It's always been my goal to break tension with humor. And at one point it got me into trouble, but then I started working at job. Like, I worked in the service industry for 13 years. And I looked at it as a survival job. And so my goal every day when I came to work, I always had an alternate objective. How can I make the people's days around me better?
Nice.
By making them laugh? and it didn't get in the way of my work. It just became part of it. So even though I was getting my job done, even though I wasn't distracting other people from getting their job done, I had this sneaky covert mission every single day. And, you know, just little things like that can help the dreadful shifts, the, you know, the difficult employees, whatever it is. It can make that go way smoother, and you can forge connections with people that you might not have normally done. So have an alternate objective kind of layered in with your work on a day-to-day basis, and it changes how you work.
I love those. I love both of those examples, and we are a bunch of stressed out bunny rabbits right now. And if we can find humor to infuse throughout our day, I think it's going to make life a lot more positively meaningful. I thank you both. I hope we can get you back on in 2023, and hopefully on a podcast episode that isn't affected by the gremlins. For those who came late to this podcast episode today, we're going to rerun it across the channels from a YouTube feed, and hopefully that'll be better off. Thank you so much, Karyn Buxman, David Horning. Be well, you guys. Take care.
One of these.
Yeah.